What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Real Dad Talk. This is, I guess, while it's not officially my first video, this is unofficially the first episode / reactionary video to some hot topics, if you will. And I've been sent a video by somebody basically wanting to get my thoughts on this topic. And for those of you that are not familiar with it, this is by a channel on YouTube called Jubilee, and they have this series that they do called Middle Ground. And in this particular episode or version of Middle Ground that they have done, it is conservative parents versus liberal teachers. And I love these debates because I feel like having an open discourse about things, especially on things that are important to many people, especially parents. I think this is something that I'm excited to jump into. So I don't want to take up too much time just talking about what the video is potentially about or whatever, because I haven't really watched any of it. And so I think we just jump right into it and see what this is all about. So let's get into it. All right, here we go.
It sounds like what you're saying is you want to be able to introduce all ways of life.
Yes.
So would it be okay to include a book with a man having a relationship with a 12-year-old in that book? I know it's extreme.
No.
Hold on, but just hear me out.
Because now
Hear
you're
me out.
equivocating gay people to pedophiles.
No. This is why I'm bringing it up, is who establishes the boundary.
The law.
But,
All right.
Teachers have their own political agendas. Step forward if you agree.
Wow, even a teacher stepped forward.
I think it's important to recognize that individuals will have political agendas. It's a natural thing, and people should understand their political views. I think where we need to differentiate it is whether a teacher should have a political agenda in a classroom.
But is your idea of a political agenda like these teachers telling students, this is who you should vote for? If you vote for these people, it's wrong. If
Yes,
you vote for
or
these people, it's right.
ridiculing the beliefs that they may have for political or religious reasons, and using their position of authority to mold the minds of everyone else.
When it comes to diversity or these new sort of terms, I am not for certain types of what so-called diversity when it comes to these new kind of topics. And
Could you expand upon that? Like, what do you think shouldn't
like
be
critical
included?
race theory or some of the gender ideologies. It's not diverse if you're the teacher, the person of authority in the classroom, and you are saying this is how something should be.
Yeah, so I come from an elementary perspective. I'm a first grade teacher, so the conversations we're having in class isn't about the socioeconomic nature of the world. But we do talk about just what it looks like for different people in different communities. So when I talk about a political agenda, the agenda that I have in the classroom is to create an environment where folks are able to better understand from wherever someone's coming from.
The problem with that, and I understand.
All right, really quick. I guess my first question is that if your students are going to school to learn about a variety of topics, why is politics involved in any of it unless you are in a political class of some sort, like a history class or something like that? And having to know the party affiliation of your teacher or the students should be completely irrelevant, because the idea, in my opinion, is that you're sending your kids to school to learn about everything as a whole, not to be spoon-fed whatever the teacher might have at their disposal to be able to indoctrinate your children into believing what they want your children to believe. I mean, that's, I don't know, call me crazy.
The sentiment as a teacher, if a child is sitting there and they happen to be black, and you're saying, well, black people, such and such and such. I mean, you're really, that's
Yeah,
not okay.
I do have to stop you there because that's not really said. It's not said black people do this.
Well,
it's not said
it's just an
Mexicans do
example.
this. Again, it's trying to understand from multiple perspectives. That's not saying that every group aligns on the same thought. That's not saying every group is a monolith. What it's saying is, even if you disagree with somebody or you come from a different tradition or a different cultural background, those people's opinions can still be valid.
And the disagree, step forward.
I'm gonna be honest, as a teacher, especially after COVID and all of that, I don't have time for a political agenda. I'm here trying to catch up with curriculum, pick up my readers that are, 2, 3 grade levels behind. I do not have time for that. I teach social emotional skills and all of that, but I'm not here to kind of, you need to believe this, and that. No. If you're a good person, we're good. We're gravy. All good. You know what I mean?
But your definition, and sometimes this can happen and it becomes political, is what is your definition of a good person? Would you think that I'm a good person because I'm raising my kids to be with Judeo-Christian values and they live in a heterosexual, heteronormative home where we talk about how divorce is wrong, cheating is wrong. We have friends of the LGBT community, but we teach our children that from a biblical perspective, that's not okay. Your definition of whether or not they are good could be very different than my definition of whether or not they are good.
To kind of clarify, in my classroom, if they're kind and they're not bashing anybody, judging anybody, kind of throwing out names, anything like that, they're good. It's not to say that topics like that don't come up in class. And I do open it up to discussion. I just keep it clear that this is a safe space. We don't judge each other. We're not going to bash each other. I understand you have your own experiences, but we're not going to come in with an agenda, you can say. And I feel like this idea of parents and their teachers of their political biases and all of this is just all of this fear that is clouding their judgment, clouding.
Except we have numerous, not just.
We have experiences.
Yeah, my
Not
own
just-
child, first week of school, what pronouns you wanted to go by. I mean, not what's your favorite subject, how can I help you succeed academically.
Who's to say that wasn't a part of the questions too, And understand.
All right, well, so this pronoun stuff is, it shouldn't be the first question, or even in any series of questions when you enter the classroom, is what are your pronouns, and what is your favorite subject, and what is your favorite color, or whatever. Your pronouns shouldn't be the topic of conversation when entering a classroom. If your pronouns are something that matter to you, then that's something that you should bring up separately, maybe even privately to the teacher, so that you can figure out a way to handle it. It shouldn't be an open discussion with the class right off the bat, day one, these are my pronouns, this is how you need to address me, because that immediately sets the trajectory of the class in a heavily liberal direction right off the bat, especially if the teacher's the one bringing it up.
And that question could stand out.
So maybe you don't understand that you're teaching politics.
But that's not politics. That's just like basic respect.
I think that's beautiful.
It's okay. It's not basic respect to ask people their pronouns, because before just a couple of years ago, this pronoun stuff never existed. It was never commonplace. When I was in school, it was not commonplace to be respectful to your fellow students, to ask them their pronouns. I've never had a teacher ask me what my pronouns are. Never. And I think it's pretty safe to say that a majority of teachers are liberal. And when I was in school, that was never a thing. It was never, hi, I'm Mrs. Smith. What are your pronouns? It was, welcome to the class. And then it was like, let us know a little bit about yourself. That was it.
But it's not true.
That's beautiful.
Not to me.
So I think you need your idea that that's basic respect. What is the framework of that? Because I think that many teachers are going through these trainings, and the trainings are saying this is the framework of how we operate in the classroom. But where did that idea come from?
Because it's based off. It's called a thing called data.
Did you
so
do that in
No, hold on.
2010?
A lot of schools have research and development, and so the state also does. So in the state of California, we do research. So at the end of the day, my job is not just to make your kid to feel comfortable. I got 55 students. I got to make 55 students feel comfortable. And so when your kid comes home and tells you, well, Mom, the teacher said, what's my pronouns? Yeah, I did say what's your pronoun. I also said, what's your favorite TV show? What's your favorite food? I am a college professor now. I was previously a 3rd, 4th grade teacher. Teaching 3rd and 4th grade was horrible. Dealing with parents who thought their child was special and should be treated a certain way. It just wasn't doable. The constant complaining, the accusing people of doing things that are not going on in our classes, not being enough.
I already don't like this guy. The fact that right off the bat he is trying to indirectly insult the conservative parent by, it's a thing called data. Like, you don't have to speak to him that way. Like, and no data reflects things like that. And the fact that this guy already right off the bat is saying that he doesn't like 3rd or 4th grade teaching because kids aren't special, and that he didn't like having to deal with parents, like, welcome to teaching. That's what you sign up for, my guy.
For their child, it was just too much. When parents don't have the knowledge of what goes on inside of a school, I think it's important for those parents to go to the school, and we as educators like our parents to be involved. You know, again.
But you just said, oh my gosh, you just said that it was too much for you and you hated it because parents would try and be too involved. But then you're saying, don't be involved because I hate it, but parents need to be more involved. I don't know. Let's just keep going.
I have too many students to push an agenda. I do my job, what they pay me to do.
Discussion about sexuality doesn't belong in schools.
I had a sex ed class when I was in 3rd grade, and it was quite simple. Boys go in this room, girls go in this room, they play a little video on a black and white TV. You know, you see the genitalia, and you're like, oh God, I got one of those, cool, now we're figuring out what I am. The fear is these schools have no boundaries. If they do the classroom thing where they want to split kids up, how many genders are we going to do this? We're going to put boys, them, and then girls, and then how many rooms do we need to create for equality? Or are we really chasing equity? And I think parents now are beginning to realize we got to stop this.
This dude's
create
smart.
Framework about sexuality, especially in a hyper-sexualized culture. My kids don't need to know at 6, 7, and 8 years old about different types of sexual acts. That's not appropriate.
People think that this is just kind of happening, it's a one-off. It is in so many schools. Where I live in Florida, there was a poster going around where kids could text anonymous strangers to get information about sex. And on this poster in school, want to get laid?
Wow.
I mean, it's beyond, and there is a push for pleasure-based sex. Pleasure for who?
My oldest is 9 years.
To kind of tie into what the first two people said is that, like, when I was in school, it was very similar. They would separate the boys and the girls, and they would have a separate educational period, and it was a class called SHARE. And I don't remember, it was an acronym for something, and I don't remember what exactly what it stood for. But you know, the idea was that you would separate the boys and the girls. You would teach the boys about their curriculum, the girls about theirs, and it was very matter of fact and biological. It wasn't about anything about pleasure or whatever. None of that existed. And the thing that blows my mind is that, if I remember correctly, they're mentioning something about the ages of like 6, 7, and 8-year-olds learning about sex in school, which it was controversial. And I'm not that old. I am 31 and a half years old. So all of this wasn't that long ago in the grand scheme of things. But when I was in high school, or when I was in school, it was controversial for them to have this when I was in 6th grade, which is 12 years old. Like, that was a controversial pushback. Then they didn't start teaching this until middle school. And now they're saying that 6, 7, and 8-year-olds are going to start learning about this in school, or that it's happening already. Absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely. Let's just keep going.
Old. She's in 3rd grade, and she's been exposed to things, and we do have conversations.
Right there. They're just in 3rd grade. 3rd grade.
About it, but that's a conversation that I should be having with my 9-year-old daughter. If a 6th grader or a 4th grader is going to be prompted by a teacher, hey, what are your pronouns? As a parent, I should have a heads up about that, because they're not even going to understand the question. And so I think that the idea that those conversations are started in the classroom instead of in the home is a big problem. I have a family member who first day of 6th grade was asked for her pronouns, and she stood up and said that as a person of faith, she believed that God didn't make a mistake making her a girl, and so therefore she identified as a she, her, and she was sent to the principal's office and punished for that decision. Thankfully, we haven't seen that broadly yet, but I think it's really damaging to take a shy, innocent 11-year-old child and make them stand in front of a classroom and determine something that they maybe haven't even put that much thought into.
I like what you said, Sean, about how you were emphasizing, how a lot of parents today felt a goodness of the way that sexual education was conducted in the past. So there is an agreement that sexuality should be talked about in schools. The disagreement is whether it should just be purely heteronormative or if we should include all aspects of sexuality. I don't think that we're doing demonstrations to encourage children how to have sex, but this is something that we are trying to, again, educate and make them aware that this kind of things happen. And while you grow up, you're going to have to experience somebody who's of this orientation.
Kids are naturally curious, and I think that what I'm hearing from you is I understand where you're maybe potentially...
Really quick to address what that guy just said before getting too far is we know that is inaccurate because there was a teacher, I don't remember exactly where the teacher was, Utah or something like that was caught and praised in some circumstances for handing out dildos and butt plugs. He was like the dean of students, handing out dildos and butt plugs and condoms and things like that to his students throughout the school, and they were walking through the halls waving them around and things like that, which is ridiculous. So it's not like, oh yeah, we're just teaching them, about reproduction and what your sexual organs are and what they do and things like that. It's they're actively showing these kids things that, quite frankly, they shouldn't be shown in a school setting.
Coming from. But then where's the line between that sex education and introducing them to porn? Because porn can be educational. I was a virgin when I got married, and for years I was made fun of and heard, well, how are you going to know if you don't try it? We hear that a lot too. If you haven't tried
peer
to
pressure.
a girl to see if you like it or not, then how do you really know that you're not a lesbian? How do you really know that you're not gay if you've never slept with a guy? How do you really know that you want to be in a monogamous relationship if you don't sleep around? And when you start to introduce those questions to children, specifically prepubescent ones, they're going to naturally be curious, and their emotional and hormonal maturity is not there to be making those types of decisions that have lifelong impact.
Well, you're right, and a lot of them are learning at home, because just like you guys are saying, they come home to tell you things. Well, guess what? Those same kids come to school and talk about what you're telling them at home. You'll be surprised what I hear from students when I do a "What do you think?" Well, let me tell you what my mama and daddy did. And look, I don't have time. Your kid is not that important to me. Not to be rude, I got like 300 students. Your kid is no more important than the other 299. So I don't have time to sit up here and let me get you to think like me. I can't get my own 23-year-old to think like me. At the end of the day, what needs to happen, and this is just my own personal take, parents need to start being parents, because a lot of times the teachers are the parents. They're parenting your kids because absentee parenting.
I think that this conversation is really interesting.
Well, yeah, so when you send your kid off to school, you are trusting these teachers to tend to your children for 8-9 hours a day, depending on the circumstances, while they're at school. And we are trusting you as our teachers and our educational institutions to do that properly and appropriately and not force feed our children what you want them to be. Like, to tie into his first point, like your kids show up to our classroom and they tell us what you said or how you feel, or my daddy says this, and it's like, well, yes, that's my child, and I'm going to raise my child the way that I want my child to be raised, and a lot of that is going to come with my beliefs and my values and my morals and things like that. I don't need you trying to unwind and unravel that and then put your own morals and beliefs and values on them and trying to have them come home and then combat that with me. That's not what you are paid to do. You are paid to teach my child math, history, science, normal kid stuff.
And I think we need to step back and look at why we automatically assume that if we're telling our children about lesbians, gay people, queer people, why do we immediately equivocate that to telling them about what sex is? That can just be something as simple as, here is a book. In this book, there are 2 dads. This book character has 2 dads. And kids, they can be inquisitive, and that's good, right? But also, like, they're gonna be like, cool, there's two dads.
All these kids know that there's a dad and a dad and a mom and a mom, and the culture is teaching all of that. So what we've noticed is that the curriculum in 8th grade and up is a lot deeper than that. It's more like, here is how you can have sex so you do not get pregnant.
Yeah.
Illustration of anal sex. That is the stuff that we're now reacting against. And that, sadly, is the trust that's being broken between teachers and parents.
Yeah, and I think we're moving into a conversation about comprehensive sex ed. What I am talking about is when I go into this classroom and I'm teaching kids, I'm not going to just teach kids material that is heteronormative.
Out of curiosity, it sounds like what you're saying is you want to be able to introduce all ways of life. Like these are the people that you will encounter with throughout life.
That is what I'm arguing, yes.
So would it be okay to include a book with a man having a relationship with a 12-year-old in that book? I know it's extreme.
No,
Hold on, but just hear me out.
Because now
Hear
you're
me out.
equivocating gay people to pedophiles.
No, I'm not.
And no, that's
I'm-
not okay.
That is not.
You're drawing a line that I'm not drawing. And
you're definitely crossing a line that should never be
I agree.
crossed.
I agree. And this is why I'm bringing it up, is who establishes the boundary?
The law.
But what
Period.
law? The law is
But the law that's been signed in some few
No, I'm
states,
sorry. No,
they
there's
do.
laws against between adults having sex with children. Now, if a student had two parents who happen to be of the same sex, I'm not going to sit there and discount who they are in my class. I cannot do that. I signed a contract.
I would never ask anybody to uplift or suppress any child. I want there to be equality in the classroom. What I am saying is that there are factual instances where this is being taught in classrooms. I pulled my children out of public school because there are so many instances of this happening. I am a parent. I'm looking in the book bag every day. I'm checking in with homework. I am talking to the teachers and the principals, and I'm involved. But we didn't know that, during class, there were images shown of literal sex acts or describing certain situations that were inappropriate for young children.
We have a belief system at home, and the children want to break the boundaries of that belief system naturally because we're human beings. That's just what we do. And we're trying to confine them to a set of beliefs to say, this is what is right in our home. And we're seeing the schools get funding from Planned Parenthood. They tried to pass a bill to put medical facilities to offer abortions in high schools here in California. And
That's a totally separate. Abortion is a totally separate topic altogether, but that's messed up. Like, not only are we going to try and persuade your children into having sex in a variety of ways because it's just in your child's nature, but once you do those sexual acts that we have taught you how to do through demonstrations, whether that be, the drawn out figures in a book or being described to them in the text that they're reading or whatever it is, we are now going to give you the opportunity to then abort a child once it has been conceived from practicing these acts that we have taught you, which is an entirely separate thing of evil all on its own. But California, you're wild. You're wild. I don't know what to tell you guys.
it's gradual, right? It starts with, this is a book that has two dads. This is a book with two moms. And it's just a gradual curiosity that could leverage and break away that child from the root in the home. My education growing up was fully public education. College is where I started getting a curiosity for truth and education, and I think I'm so passionate about the education system today because it is obviously broken, but how do we fix it? Many of these progressive ideas in fixing it is just more empathy, sympathy, safety, but in reality, I see the public school system isn't actually accomplishing the goal of what education is, which is teaching critical thinking, how to understand, how to ask good questions, and then comprehend how to problem solve.
Affirmative action is racial discrimination.
There was a high school down the street from where I live in Los Angeles that encouraged all the kids of color to apply for their school play. And only once all the kids of color received whatever positions they wanted, then the white kids could apply. That, in my opinion, is an example of discrimination. The fact that we now have Harvard.
It's not even discrimination. It's 100% racism. You are singling out a specific race, telling them that they cannot do something at the benefit of another race. Like, nobody's saying that black people can't be in the play, or that they're not qualified or they don't have the abilities to do it. Like the best actor or, you know, person for the role should get that role. It shouldn't be based off of color. That itself is racism, 100%. 100%. You're not going to convince me otherwise.
Harvard has black-only kids' dorms. That, to me, is
Racism.
segregation.
With affirmative action, we've seen with Harvard lawsuits and other things how it's backfiring and it's picking and choosing of which minorities can and cannot have success. It was done to try to create or make up for the wrongs of our past, but I think it's really backfired.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, excluding those excelling students in other races to fix the problems of the past, like you said. But I think the past, there were a lot of minorities that were excelling and doing really well.
Despite the foot of the
Exactly.
government. And like,
Yes.
kudos to them.
Yes.
Incredible, strong human beings. And we shouldn't have that discrimination in any way anymore, but unfortunately, it has become a discrimination against other groups.
Yeah, it's racism. It is racism. If
Facts.
you are taking a group of people and judging them on their race and setting them aside, giving them a special treatment, if you are uplifting a person or you are trying to suppress a person because of their race, that is racism. So we're supposed to believe that someone like Barack Obama's children are like struggling because they're black? Like, that's ridiculous. So I pulled my oldest daughter out a public school in Florida. We were having debates about pulling down statues and changing names, and some of the school board members and some of the activist groups were saying that black children could not learn because of names on buildings, and that is completely asinine to me. It basically says that because we have a higher level of melanin, somehow our brains don't work. And every other kid could walk into the building and get the education that they needed, but somehow not for you black children. And I found that to be just disgusting. And I did not want my children to have any type of idea coming from authority figures who believed in such things like that.
Wow.
First of all, I would like to say that affirmative action programs, the biggest beneficiary according to the data, and this has been government data, has been white women first and foremost. Second of all, I would never use Barack Obama's kids as a barometer for anything because they do have privilege as well as Will Smith kids. But if we talk about Laquan Smith down the street that nobody knows, there will be some impediments based on his race. Yeah.
Why? How do you know that?
Because people do tend to look and see race. What you were talking about is just racism, but when it's institutional and structural, it does something totally different. And when the black wealth gap is 100 years behind the white wealth gap in America, it'll take 100 years to catch up.
Why do you think that's because of racism, though? You take one thing and say that is the cause for every person of color.
The data bears out.
This guy loves to throw the term data in people's faces when the data speaks completely in opposition to what he's saying. Like, nobody is arguing saying that black people are incapable or that they're inferior or anything like that, except for the people that think they're fighting racism. Like, we need to give other races other than white people a chance to enter college through affirmative action by saying that they are incapable of reaching the same metrics as white people, which we know is false. They can surpass white people in every metric if they applied themselves, and we're saying that they're incapable of doing that, so we need to have a policy in place to ensure that they can get into the same schools. That is racism, 100%. Like, how would you feel if you were a black person and you got into a school through an affirmative action program, and once you know what affirmative action is, saying that because of your skin color, you were awarded a position over somebody else solely based off of your skin color? I mean, it is what it is.
Data. What data is saying that black
Scientists.
people are behind? Because there are many black people that aren't behind, that are doing much better than other people.
100%.
No, you're
Wow.
absolutely right. And there are outliers in every single
School
community.
data, man.
There are very strong, members of the black community that are very affluent. There are also a majority that live in poverty. And if we see a bunch of cities that are majority person of color, and we're trying to recognize why have these places stayed at a very stable poverty line. But there are systemic reasons to why these communities are like that. How would you say that?
I would say probably because of policies that are in those cities.
Racist policies, absolutely.
Hold on, we got to define terms. When would you say that Watts and Compton became
The
what it
irony.
is? Was it like that in the 40s and 50s?
No, it's a growth
No,
because
I'm
of the
asking
policies,
you,
from
when-
redlining policies that were enabled.
In California?
Yeah, absolutely. California put in racist policies. I would never deny that.
All of these supposed solutions are actually hurting. Wouldn't a better solution be to teach our kids that we're all born in the image of God? We should all treat one another equally. And if you're if you don't
Okay,
believe
then
in
all
God,
men should be
then
created
we're all
equal with certain
and we're all
understandable.
equal, right? If you come from a poor neighborhood,
Just a quick note: the fact that teacher in the black shirt thing with the frilly hair, as soon as she mentioned God, as soon as the conservative mom mentioned God, that she started laughing, that is mind blowing. Like, I would never think to laugh at somebody for their religion or their religious views. I would rather seek to understand them if they differed from mine. That's just ridiculous.
whether you're black or Hispanic or an immigrant from anywhere, obviously you don't have the same privileges that somebody who comes from a wealthy community, but that has nothing to do with your color. I don't think that if you're an impoverished black kid or you're an impoverished white kid, one should receive a resource and the other shouldn't.
Would you say that it's economic then is the reason that causes these disparities?
Economic, but I don't think it's related to color.
But would you say if there's a majority of a particular group that lies underneath the poverty line in economic, that race has anything to do with that?
It could, but it's just not blanket. You don't know. And why don't we look at the families, the black families, who have done those amazing things in this country and study what they did to succeed instead of just focusing on, oh, well, black people are behind and we don't even know what to do. Well, why don't we just go and look? Since you are a professor, wouldn't that be, you go and look at what has worked?
Well, I would never just go to you and just look at you. Again, and I'm sorry, it's just the reality of the data. And so what I share...
Data can be broken up in umpteen different ways.
No, it can't.
Yes, it
No,
can.
actually, I just give
You're a
the data.
professor and you're saying
That's
that
Data man
cannot
at it
be
again.
manipulated?
I don't
This is why
manipulate
my
data.
kids do not go to public
I
school
don't,
anymore.
and I'm glad they don't.
I just think it's interesting.
Wow.
I'm thinking of like an anecdotal story I have. Last year, the school that I taught at, Deep East Oakland, I served majority black and brown students. Over 70% of our families under the poverty line. These are some of the hardest working people I have ever seen in my life. They get up, they have 2 or 3 jobs, 3 or 4 children.
I would argue
because of their economic status, right?
because of liberal policies that is the government telling them that they can and cannot succeed, because of how high our property taxes are here, because we do not have school choice where they can take their dollars somewhere else. If you put those same families in redder districts in the country, like places in Florida and Texas or Virginia, where they have better options for their family, you would definitely see them be able to
And where
succeed at
black and
different
brown children are
1000%.
still underperforming in schools.
But coming from Florida, the school that I was at, it's graded from like A to like D, F. When I started there, it was a C school. Very poor performing. And technically, sure, they have school choice. They don't have state tests anymore. But they're still so badly performing. The community of it, black, brown, very little white students in that community. But not to say that student of color can't be more affluent, but I think it's ridiculous to kind of say that color doesn't play a part into disparities and
Because it doesn't. Color does not play a role in the disparities of our children. I could tell you that the number one reason that does play into it, that is an absolute fact, is fatherless homes. When a father is not present in the home, our children suffer. 1000%. And the community that is most affected by fatherless homes is black people. It is a fact. So the problem isn't a policy necessarily. I mean, it's an argument for another day. The problem is fatherless homes. Whether it doesn't matter about your skin color, because if you are a white person with no father in the home, you are going to suffer just as much as anybody else with no father in the home. It's not to say that there are exceptions out there where people may have been treated poorly based off of their skin color, or children treated inappropriately based off of their skin color, whatever it might be. But the problem as a whole is not based off of racism. However, trying to fight this apparent racism with more racism by saying that because you are not as smart as a white person, we're going to put a policy in place to make sure that you get to where a white person is completely messed up, because you're instantly telling that black person that they are incapable because they need that in place for them to succeed, rather than empowering them and teaching them how to get to that next level to be just like all of their peers, rather than looking at them through the lens of color. Absolutely ridiculous. Let's finish up this section.
Just disadvantages. So in Florida, a lot of people that I had encountered weren't kind to others, and sometimes I would have coworkers call students retarded and using racist slurs and things like that. And from my standpoint, hearing something like that, it disgusted me. My coworkers very quickly were able to kind of distinguish me from the rest. Like, if I was gonna come to the teacher's lounge, more hushed conversation, people wouldn't share as much as they used to, just because I would call out behavior like that.
I don't know if it's calling out the behavior. I think it's because you seem like you might be more of the sensitive type. I'm, as you could probably tell from, maybe at the beginning of the video with the Xbox controllers, the gaming controllers that I have on my desk, that I'm a gamer, and I love me some video games. I'm curious as to see what these liberal teachers' reactions would be to a Call of Duty lobby circa 2010, 2008. The amount of racism that was thrown, like, it would be one of those the Michael Jackson memes where you would just sit back with a tub of popcorn just listening to lobbies tear each other apart. It was some of the greatest stuff that I've ever witnessed. Well, and great as in funny. That's what I mean. So, oops. All right, so that is going to conclude part 1 of this reaction video. I want to finish the rest of this because I am deeply intrigued by the conversations that are happening here. But I wanted to be able to break it up in parts. As implied by the title of this show, I am a dad, and I do have dad obligations, dad duties to tend to. And so I'm going to go take care of those really quick, but please, please, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below letting me know your thoughts. We're going to come back with a part 2 to finish this video so that we can figure out what else they talk about here, because I'm curious.